Hi everybody, it's Caroline Coram from the Boom Review, and this is the weekly update. The light is getting worse as storm clouds approach and I can hear thunder in the distance. There has been a bit of lightning over the UK in the south and also off the east coast last night, very close to where we are, and it kept me awake. I couldn't hear it, but I could feel it. A few things have happened this week. Sulphur dioxide round 2. Where has that been coming from? Has it actually been coming from Iceland? Quite a few people have asked me that, so I'm going to take a look at that very quickly. I can't give you a definitive answer, but I can have some really good guesses. Then also we had arsine gas. I don't really need to go over that. I think we all had it, and that was followed, of course, by lightning. And climate change. Everybody has been racking their brains about why on earth everybody's rambling on about CO2 levels, rising sea levels, heat and all of that. And I think I might have found that tiny piece of the puzzle, it's actually quite a big piece of the puzzle, that helps everything slot into place. And without it, nothing really makes sense at all. So CO2, let's take a look at that. I'll crack on. I'm just going to start by pointing out Crimson 1 and Crimson 2 from Draken. They do counter weather mod for us here in the UK. They usually work in unison with the RAF. And they're here today because we have a large storm off the west coast coming off of the Atlantic, and this is countermeasures to that. So there's a large system rotating over the Atlantic here. It's actually moving clockwise, quite unusual. So you can see it's concertinaing here up on the southwest coast and against this system here in the northwest of France, and being driven up to the northeast area of the UK. You can see lightning there. That is a result of the system coming in from the Baltics, bashing into the system coming from the south yesterday, and that was moving all the way up the east coast overnight, and is now static because it has this other system coming in from the west. So we're a bit of a battleground at the moment, and hopefully things are going to improve sooner rather than later. So I'm just watching this system really carefully because we've got lightning in the West Atlantic, and that has the potential to go up and around over onto the UK from the north side, which is quite an unusual thing to happen. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that. So you can see the system at about 3,000 meters a bit more clearly, and the rotation clockwise. Moving on to the sulphur dioxide cloud, the first eruption around August the 22nd, you can see a very dry area of air over the North Atlantic here, over Iceland and to the north of the UK. So that's represented by the red you can see. Dry air, of course, being ideal for gas being dispersed in the atmosphere. So this plume here to the north of the UK is pretty much where we tracked the sulphur dioxide cloud moving to at the end of that first phase, but it still doesn't tell us an awful lot about where this came from. So this is the ASH RGB guide. It uses the red, green and blue colour guide in order to identify what bits in the atmosphere belong to a volcano, which bits are gas and which bits are actually solid particles. Pure ash shows as bright red, diffusing to pink, and sulphur dioxide is pure green in an ideal environment, and then ash mixed in with sulphur dioxide is a yellowy colour that could be confused with mid-thick clouds. So it's quite tricky unless the sky is very clear to see exactly what is going on. So now we're going to go on a quick hunt to see if we can find any bright green on the map anywhere near Iceland. So this Umestat layer represents volcanic ash globally. So I'm going to be jumping around a little bit just to have a look. So we've got some yellow, it could be a bit yellow and green, but there's not much going on over Iceland, and that's where it's meant to be coming from. But we can see some very clear trails coming from planes there into that cloud system that is lingering over Iceland. So I'm going backwards in time from the 27th back to when the eruption happened in the fissure, and you can see this strange orangey red colour here in the middle of Greenland. What's that? Is that volcanic? And again, you've got signs of trails coming from that area towards Iceland. Going back in time from the 25th of August, we can see there is a mild green layer over the northern part of the Atlantic, but it's still very unclear where that's coming from. We've got layers of ash to the east of Greenland that look like they could have come from Greenland and not necessarily from Iceland. And we can see a considerable amount of ash to the north of Iceland as well, going on to Greenland, and then also this emerald green colour coming out from in between Canada and Greenland, that strait there. And that might be also amalgamated in this big cloud of sulphur dioxide. This is going right back to before the supposed fissure erupted. So I just want to have a look at this area a little bit more closely because the map doesn't cover it entirely, so it's hard to tell what's going on. There's certainly a significant patch of red appearing over Greenland. This suggests that there is some sort of volcanic or other similar to volcanic activity, explosions perhaps. And you have green now coursing through the strait in between Greenland and Canada and emerging off the east of Greenland as well. So it is quite possible, I think, that this sulphur dioxide cloud going into the 22nd may be predominantly coming out of Greenland and not Iceland in such great quantities at all, certainly not the quantities that we've seen over the Atlantic and over Europe. I wonder if anybody out there has flown over Greenland recently. Is it just covered in cloud and you can't actually see any of this other stuff going on underneath? Do reach out and let me know. Moving on to climate change, I'm going to try and explain to you how I think they are creating it, because it is almost certainly created by the war in the sky. And there are different elements to it, but I think there is one key element that nobody has really talked about at all. So what makes me think that this is all engineered? We've been watching storms develop for years now, 4 years, and what we've noticed is that sometimes we will get a big storm develop from a tiny, tiny pinpoint in the sea or on land, usually in a remote area. And that pinpoint will then spread with the wind into a huge mushroom. You don't always get a pinpoint, but you often get a mushroom that will stay static for an unnatural amount of time and move very, very slowly. Perhaps that is the speed that anvil clouds move at, but these clouds seem to be strategically placed around the world. And wherever there is a big event, a sporting event, a cultural event, or just a sunny weekend, usually we will find that one of these mushroom clouds pops up from nowhere. We've started putting out warnings for them because they are so frequent, but the frequency, of course, is tending to go over people's heads because they are a little fed up, like the rest of us, of being constantly bombarded. So what exactly is igniting these clouds? I thought initially that they might be using rockets with, say, aluminium and various other hydrophilic components. So hydrophilic means that water is attracted to them. But then I thought, these are growing so fast and so quickly and are almost unpredictable that they have to be using something a little bit more volatile than that. So I revisited some of the papers that I'd looked at the beginning of this journey and realised that I had completely ignored dry ice. So dry ice is actually carbon dioxide in a solid form. So I looked for a video on something a little bit more scientific about dry ice, not the make your own smoke machine, and I came across Tommy Technetium here. And this is a fantastic experiment because what he is showing is that when you put dry ice into water, the weight of the water actually decreases, because what's happening is when the carbon dioxide released from the dry ice starts to form a gas bubble, the bubbles then of course float to the top of the water in the container, but inside these bubbles they are actually carrying molecules of water. So he showed in the experiment that the vapor or smoke coming out from the top of the container with the water and the dry ice was actually water vapor from the water in the container, not water vapor being gathered from the environment. So in theory, you could choose a body of water and feed dry ice pellets into it and create yourself a cloud. It wouldn't necessarily go up very quickly, though. You need to look for the right conditions, and those conditions would be an area with quite a lot of warmth. So warmth combined with cold, the hot air rises and the cold air goes in underneath. And of course, the dry ice is very, very cold, and that encourages the warm air to displace into the atmosphere. So suddenly you have your funnel of very fast growing cloud going up into the atmosphere with whatever other particles it's carrying. Say, for example, microplastics create a nice charge and would encourage lightning. So these three elements together, water, dry ice and microplastics, could in theory create a lightning storm. So the increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere could potentially be explained by this cloud seeding method. But are there other elements that we could check that might verify further that this system is actually being used? In this chart of tornado activity in the United States from 1955 to 2013, we can see that whilst the frequency of the number of days experiencing tornadoes in the US is dropping slightly, there are periods where there are huge numbers of tornadoes all converging at once. And this is very representative of some of the extremely volatile storms that we've been seeing recently. So the combination of a number of dry ice-based, extremely cold clouds could create the perfect conditions with the warm land and atmosphere of a hot summer in America to the creation of large numbers of tornadoes. It would be technically quite easy to hide some of these storm creations. If you seed them over mountainous areas, then everybody is going to expect storms to develop there. And the same goes for storms developing in the ocean. With an endless supply of water in the ocean, that is a lot easier than creating a storm, for example, in the middle of the desert of Africa. And this is where we start to get our eye in to understanding which storm is natural and which storm is engineered. So if we go back to the original video of the experiment, remembering that water is being vaporized into the bubble of carbon dioxide that is being sublimed from dry ice. And as the water leaves the container, it is released into the air as moisture. And this might explain why there has been a significant change over a number of years in the level of humidity across the globe. Certainly here in the UK, the humidity levels have increased dramatically over the last 4 years, and it is something that I hope is not going to continue because at times it is quite unbearable. And it seems even the Met Office concurs that humidity is on the rise, even when relative humidity was decreasing around 2010. In 2020, it looks like it was also reversing that trend and was heading upwards. So I wonder if we looked at these spikes in relative humidity, would we be able to identify periods of great unrest around the world? Perhaps we will find wars coupled with tremendous storms. So it seems that the natural flow of weather systems is being interfered with on quite a grand scale. Not only is it increasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but the storms which the dry ice are forming are also converting carbon dioxide into carbon-14, and that is a carbon element that is toxic to plants. It is absorbed by plants as part of the carbon dioxide. So that element is actually very detrimental to our environment as a whole. Not only that, but the arsine gas that we suspect is being dispersed into the atmosphere is also interacting with these lightning storms and creating something called arsenic-74, which is a radioactive version of arsenic, a little bit nastier in the bite. Not only do these storms cause major problems for habitats and humans and animals alike, but they are also used to transport these other toxic elements that are being used to reduce our resilience health-wise and to also reduce the resilience of our crops and our livestock. So I think we will all agree that the sooner this war is won and the dry ice seeding of clouds, if that is indeed what it is put an end to. We're going to be spending some time on Sky and Earth Anomalies on TG, trying to find further points that we can use as reference to verify that these storms are indeed engineered. It's not quite enough just having this pinpoint plume and the mushroom cloud pattern. But the system across the Atlantic that we see today, with the jet stream in complete disarray and everything going in the wrong direction, and the jet stream looking for all like a king cobra, is not the ideal scenario. It becomes very unmanageable for life on this planet to continue in this way. So I'm going to leave you with those thoughts, and if you want to help us on Sky and Earth Anomalies, please do join the Telegram channel. It is open. We don't chat a lot, we work a lot, we gather observations, read the pinned threads, everything is explained in those. And if you're unsure about posting something, just check and say please delete if necessary. Thank you so much for listening to this week's Boom Review update. And let me know if you have any questions or queries. Obviously, this is a working theory. We have a lot more work to do on it to verify. And hopefully, at some point, some data will be released that will confirm our suspicions. Have a really good week, and until next time.